Welcome to Undiet Your Coaching Podcast. I'm Stephanie Dodier, clinical nutritionist and creator of the Going to Beyond the Food method, and I'm on a mission to help all coaches undiet their life and their coaching business. Ready? Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast, my dear colleague. We're going to talk about any form of eating behavior, emotional eating, binge eating, compulsive eating, all the eating, all the actions, all the eating behavior, and the relationship of those behavior with our nervous system and the regulation of our nervous system. I'm going to contextualize this for you as an example. I'm going to go to the business world. So as a business owner, you have an offer into the world. You're offering your services to solve a problem that a segment of the population has, your ideal client, and they have this problem and you have the solution. Most of the problem that people have that they're willing to pay for to solve are behavioral problem, right? That it is overeating, binge eating, emotional eating, restrictive eating. They are experiencing a behavior and they want this behavior to stop. Now, the reason why they want the behavior to stop could be different to many of them, but typically, the reason why they want this behavior to stop is because they believe their life will be better. Could be better because they're going to lose weight, could be better because they're going to stop suffering, could be better because they're going to experience freedom around food. That's something that you need to discover as you're completing a consultation with your client. But bottom line is this: the behavior is the problem to be fixed. That's the perspective of your client. That's the perspective of most of the world, right? We fix behavior and our life gets better. What I want to offer you today is that us as professional, as coaches, we cannot share this perspective. We cannot share the perspective that the behavior is the problem to be solved. Now, I fully recognize that for most of us on this podcast here listening to this, that's what we were trained to do. We were told by our teacher, by our certification, by our degree, that we solve for behavior. We have a fix-it approach. Right? People have a problem and we have a solution and we fix. In the case of an eating behavior, we fix the eating behavior. In fact, there's an entire industry that probably many of you are from, which is the health coaching industry, that pride themselves to be solely focused on health behavior, right? They will coach people to have quote unquote better health behavior. It's not because it's popular, it's not because it's what's common, that it's the good approach, the right approach. If we meet the behavior as being the problem, then we miss what will resolve the behavior permanently, sustainability for the rest of their life. Behavioral coaching done at the behavior level miss the reason why the behavior is there in the first place. We miss understanding that the eating behavior in this case is nothing but just a sign. A behavior, so I'm going to take you into the world that we teach. So we do mindset coaching and Undiet Your Coaching, not from a place of manifestation and woo-woo and green lush mountain. I'm just going to sit on a mountain and manifest a new behavior around food. We actually take a science-based approach to mindset, which is neuroscience, cognitive behavioral coaching or modeling, right? We follow how what we understand up to this point of the human brain and human behavior, which is your belief system creates thoughts in your brain that then creates an emotion you are experiencing, and that emotion triggers a behavior. It triggers a reaction, right? So all of your eating behavior you're coaching with your client are nothing but a reaction to an emotion. Therefore, you coaching directly the behavior, you solving for the behavior without addressing the emotion and the thoughts that created that emotion will only delay the behavior rehappening again. Because your client will keep thinking the thought and will keep experiencing the emotion. They may temporarily divert the behavior while using willpower and self-discipline, but in the long run, that behavior will reappear. And a side note here, that's the reason why I'm here today. That's why the reason why I created the methodology called Going Beyond the Food, because as a nutritionist, at first 3 years of my practice, I kept coaching the food behavior as I was taught and educated to do. So I kept coaching that behavior, and then the client would finish their work with me. I worked locally back in the days in Canada, in Toronto, and I kept seeing my client a year down the road, 2 years down the road, meet them somewhere, and they kept saying to me, "Oh, I'm so ashamed, Stephanie. I've gone back to my old ways. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't discipline myself to eat this way or do this way." And as a practitioner, as somebody who wants to help women, in my case, I'm like, damn, I'm not doing my job. Like, what is wrong with the way I'm approaching nutrition that people can't, quote unquote, stick with it? It's my job to figure out how to get people to stick with it, because otherwise they're just wasting their money on me. So that's what brought me into the world of neuroscience and cognitive behavioral modeling. And then I realized that what I was trained to do, which is to tell people what to do in their behavior, was actually counterproductive. Because the reason why they had the behavior was not by a lack of education and a lack of information, but instead because they were experiencing emotion and their nervous system was reacting in such a way that they had these behavior with food. Are you approaching your client in that way? Yes, the client will come to you with a problem. In fact, most of your marketing will be about the problem, because that's how they have learned, that's how your clients have learned to think about the way they behave around food. But is your approach, your assessment of the situation of your client, your protocol you're going to build for them, addressing the emotion and the thought, addressing how their nervous system is reacting? So today on our mentorship call, we were talking about overeating and how people have the thought, if I learn to eat intuitively, then I'm going to constantly overeat. The thing is, the overeating is only but a reaction to an emotion. Your job as a coach is to find out what is the emotion present in your client that creates the reaction, the coping mechanism of overeating, and the thought that creates that. Well, guess what? Most thoughts and emotion that sits behind overeating is restriction, feeling restricted. And the coping mechanism to that is overeating while you can. Trying to control or restrain the overeating will do nothing, because the thought, I need to restrict my food, is in the brain of your client. In fact, the belief that drives that thought is mostly, vast majority of the case, fat phobic thought. And you not being able or not knowing that you need to go there with your client in order for you to help them release these overeating behavior or those binge eating behavior or compulsion around food, you need to address the fat phobic belief that they have will lead you to only one place, is to coach them in self-discipline and willpower, because you don't know what else to do. So what I'm here to offer you today is that the eating behavior that we're trying to solve, the solution to it is not at the behavior level, but at the thought and the belief. Another pattern that I'm seeing happening more and more and more is regulation of the nervous system as a coping mechanism. So let me explain that to you. So over the last 2 years, I'm seeing a much higher level of awareness to the nervous system and to how our prior experiences, our families of origin, how trauma, how these experiences we have lived through in the past affect how our nervous system is responding to the world today, right? So there's more and more of trauma awareness, of dysregulation of the nervous system. And with our fix-it approach that we have, it's a mindset that we have in society, and even as professional, we go to fix the nervous system, right? So I'm seeing these breathwork course and meditation and movement for nervous system regulation, which is amazing. But the whole conversation about why is the nervous system dysregulated is not happening. So, and this applies to us. The reason why people binge, example, is because they have a dysregulated nervous system. The reason why people have compulsive eating behavior is because they have a nervous system that's dysregulated. The system has learned to cope with X, Y circumstance in their life with food, which is fine. That's not a problem. It's just an indication. The question that we have to ask ourselves as practitioners is why? Why do they have a dysregulated system? Yes, we can teach them temporarily coping tool like breath work, like movement, but these techniques are not going to regulate the nervous system long term. It's only, again, coping mechanism. When we use breath work because we feel, example, anxiety in our body, what we're doing is allowing for the anxiety to be processed using our breath, which is great in the moment. But why are you anxious? That's the therapeutic question we need to ask. Why is your brain needing to create the emotion of anxiety and the coping tool associated with it in your case, which could be eating behavior? Why? And this is where we come back to the place where we need to coach at the why level, at the thought and the belief system, not at the anxiety or the compulsive eating behavior. And why I call this a problem is that I see all the time, and I'm sure you see the same thing, these influencers on social media posting 1 hour morning routine. Here's my routine, my morning routine as an entrepreneur. I cold plunge, I do some breath work, I do some journaling, I do this and I do that. When I see that, here's what it tells me as a coach. As a coach who is trained to understand behavior, it tells me you have a lot of thoughts and beliefs that you're managing with breath work and cold plunge and so forth. There's another way to live. We can stop having to use this 1 hour morning routine if we address the thought and the belief that creates the emotion that you're regulating with all these morning routines. And the only way to retrain your nervous system to not be dysregulated every morning is to go at the thought and the belief level and like investigate and find out, here's are the things that has happened to me or to your client that cause them to create anxiety every single morning that requires them to have a 1 hour morning routine. And then from there, we need to coach at that level. Now, our approach is not only neuroscience and cognitive behavioral modeling, but it's also intersectional coaching. And that is essential for all of us in the field of the non-diet approach, is understanding social conditioning. How social conditioning impacts the thoughts and the belief system of your client, which then creates an emotion like shame for their body size, and then creates a need for coping behavior like emotional eating, compulsive eating, because they're constantly feeling ashamed because of the size of their body, because they are born, raised, and conditioned to be fat phobic. You see what I'm saying? If that trail of investigation is not present in your coaching with your client and you're not showing your client this is why all of this is happening, is because you are co-opting a fat phobic belief system, then the coping mechanism will never change at the end, or it'll just change form, right? I have had the immense pleasure of coaching many alcoholics, because the Going to Beyond the Food method is very similar to what is known in the AA world as the 12 steps program, where we go beyond the alcohol, we go beyond the food. So many people are attracted to my approach because it's feels normal to them after I have gone through the AA. And what's interesting is they come to me because their coping mechanism that was alcohol is no longer usable, and they have started to use food. And then so they start controlling food, they start like manipulating their food, and then they start having all those rebound behavior around food because they've addressed the alcoholism only at the behavioral level. So they haven't looked at their thoughts and their belief that caused them to be having very intense emotion that led them to use alcohol. They haven't done that. They just move the goalpost to someone else, and now they're repeating the behavior now with food. So the magic happens when I bring them to understand how they're creating these emotions by their thoughts and their belief. And then we can start working on changing the belief and the thoughts. Will change in time the way they're feeling their emotion, which will reduce the need for them to use coping behavior that it is with alcohol or with food. That's how eating behavior and nervous system regulation play together. Obviously, the intention of this podcast is not to train you as a professional. My intention of putting this podcast out into the world is for you to first understand the link between the eating behavior and the nervous system, and then the root of that nervous system dysregulation, which is the thought into belief, for you to see the big picture and then to learn how to do the work at that level. And the first place that I 100% believe that the work needs to happen is not from a book to your client, but it's a book, a training, a program to you. You need to embody this work. You need to know how your thoughts creates your feeling, how you're feeling, impact your nervous system, how your nervous system impact your behavior. You need to know how this works in you, how this feels in you. You need to know how it feels to learn to regulate your nervous system permanently, not just put a Band-Aid on it with a bunch of breath work. And then to facilitate this life-changing, transformative work with other people. This is not the type of work that can be done at the intellectual level because it has to be embodied. If you're trying to coach other people through this work without having experienced it for yourself, it will be highly unsafe for your client. And I'm just going to end the podcast on this, and maybe that'll be the topic for the next podcast. But when your clients don't have safety in their relationship with you or in their relationship from them to them, it's impossible for them to create new neural pathways in their brain because the amygdala is literally activated thinking we're unsafe, we're unsafe, we're unsafe, we're unsafe. There's no time or condition for the brain to create new belief system and new neural pathways to have new behavior. All the energy and the resources of the brain are spent on dealing with the unsafe environment. So in order for your coaching and for your client to create new neural pathway, the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, needs to be in a calm state. And most often at the beginning of this nervous system regulation, that safety is brought on in the relationship between the coach and the client. You bring safety to the table by meeting your client with neutrality, with your energy being safe. And then they start feeling safe in your presence and your coaching. And then they can start accessing the thoughts and the belief that will long-term change their behavior. You're the facilitator of that safety that will then enable them to do the work. I understand that this was a lot to digest. Obviously, we train on that for weeks and weeks in our program. If you do have interest for this work that is facilitated specifically in eating behavior, body image, self-worth, all these topics around how people show up into the world around their body and food, we specialize in teaching that and training people on that. So come over to our world and it'll be a pleasure for me to teach you this mindset coaching without manifestation, specially designed around an intersectional lens into diet culture, fat phobia, and feminism. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you on the next podcast. Ready to shed diet culture from your practice and help more clients do the same? Awesome. We've got free resources to get you started. Simply go to stephaniedodier.com/pro series, all in one word, and access our 3 free training classes that are currently available. We also have a free PDF guide to intuitive eating, an article about the non-diet approach. We also offer a variety of paid programs throughout the year to support you in your journey to undiet your coaching practice. Join us at stephaniedodier.com/pro series, and I'll see you on the other side.